I think like many people with hyperhidrosis, you often give up hope. And that was something that I definitely experienced. It's the fact that it's more than just the physical. It's that entirely separate piece, that mental burden, everything that you plan your day around, the psychological impacts, the condition itself. It's really twofold. It's more than just what you see at the surface. Just talking about it and knowing you're not alone, it gives you confidence that you can pretty much do anything and it doesn't have to define you.
You're listening to the Sweaty Girl Society podcast, a show for women with hyperhidrosis where we share tips for living better with excessive sweating. I'm your host, Karina. Now let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Sweaty Girl Society podcast. In this episode, I sit down with Ashley Privette. Ashley is the founder and CEO of Twofold, and she also lives with hyperhidrosis herself. Twofold is a company based in the US, and they are making new prescription strength treatment options for people with hyperhidrosis and making access to care a little bit easier. I think you're going to love this conversation because not only do we learn about the different exciting treatment options that are available, we also get into Ashley's personal story. We talk about what it was like for her growing up with hyperhidrosis, what it's like making a product for people with hyperhidrosis as somebody with hyperhidrosis, and so much more. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Hi, Ashley. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's so great to be here.
Yeah, so you and I crossed paths about 6 or 7 months ago when you were just about to launch Twofold. And I've been following your journey ever since then. And so I'm really excited to speak with you today, to dig into your story, to talk about what you've been working on. We've also tried to record this podcast a dozen times and things keep happening. So I'm really glad that we have connected here today and I look forward to chatting. So before we talk about Twofold and your journey there, I was wondering if you would be willing to share your personal story with hyperhidrosis with everybody listening today, sort of your earliest memory of hyperhidrosis and how it has shaped your life.
Yeah, definitely. No, I first appreciate you being patient and finding the time and us finally getting to connect over months of trying to get this. I'm super excited to share more twofold, but also just to reach, larger people, community, and I think it's gonna be great. So kind of going back, I was diagnosed with hyperhidrosis over 15 years ago at this point. And so it was classic starting in middle school. And, I like to tell people no one is shouting from the rooftops, hey, I'm a sweaty gal or anything like that. It's just not many people knew about hyperhidrosis, that excessive sweating was a thing. And it wasn't something I was talking about with my friends. So naturally, I would talk to my mom about it, went to my pediatrician. And what was really funny, I think now looking back, is at the time, the doctor had told me to cover myself in aluminum chloride and wrap myself in saran wrap nightly. And as you can imagine, no teenage girl is telling her friends that she is doing that every night.
Yeah.
And also, had it worked, would not have started Twofold. That was really kind of my first, I'd say, attempt at beyond the over-the-counter deodorants and antiperspirants, which also at the time I did not know the difference between the two. But that was really my first attempt at really trying to, one, tackle this as what I saw as a problem, but also to identify it as actually a condition. And so from there, I would say it was really almost like this exploratory path of different treatments for over 14 years and trying everything from, again, all the OTC products, all the prescription antiperspirants, to different treatments like iotophoresis, Botox, microwave thermolysis for underarms. And I've had some unfortunate experiences with a few of them. And I think like many people with hyperhidrosis, some points and many points you probably often give up hope. And that was something that I definitely experienced. And it was difficult because as my hands, my feet, my underarms primarily, but also I have like different areas where the sweat comes, and it dictated everything from what I wore to if I was seen or perceived as an approachable or touchy and affectionate person. And it really limited what I thought I could do or what I could be. And I think so. My hyperhidrosis from a very young age did really shape me. And I don't think it was until the past year or so when I started connecting with other individuals, like many individuals, hundreds who have this, where just talking about it and knowing that you're not alone, it really kind of just gives you a lot of confidence in that you can pretty much do anything. And it doesn't have to define you. One word that I always come back to is normal. And one of the things that I don't like about that word is how it's typically used in phrasing, like, you should be normal. And it's like, no, no, no. I don't think that's necessarily the goal or the mission. I think it's you should be able to find or define your normal and
Mhm.
feel good about that. I think that's a really big distinction that I really came to after talking with others who have struggled with the same pieces that I struggled with, which was one, just accessing specialists who even know what hyperhidrosis is and that it is treatable and it's treatable beyond deodorants and antiperspirants. And then two, just actually accessing the products, which can be quite difficult for a number of reasons, especially I'm based in the US. And so insurance is not always the easiest thing to deal with here. So it was really, those were the two main takeaways is that access to specialists is hard, access to good products is even harder. So like, let's just do something about it. And that's
Yeah.
ultimately drove me to Twofold. So
Yeah, you bring up so many interesting themes. There's so many jumping off points here to unpack a little bit. When you described the initial treatment that you were offered when you first received your diagnosis, I had the exact same experience. So I was diagnosed at around, I think, age 20. So that would have been a little over 20 years ago for me now. But that was my same experience. So I was given a medicated topical and told to go home, put it on my hands, and wrap my hands in saran wrap and then put on socks on my hands and feet. And just that idea alone to somebody with hyperhidrosis, that triggered my sweating. The thought of covering my hands with saran wrap and then putting a sock on them. I mean, how does that even work, right? I understand the sentiment there, but it just seemed like such a mismatched treatment. So, like you say, treatments have evolved and there's more options available, but there is definitely a need for more.
definitely. And I think to your point, one of the biggest things is like in your teen or in your early 20s, you are quite vulnerable. Like
Hmm.
you are figuring out who you are. You are in environments, unfortunately, where you have bullies and things are embarrassing and you probably have acne and you are trying to figure out your style and you are trying to figure out so many things. And you don't have the confidence that you necessarily have that you when you know who you are, that you gain that in time. And so when sweat decides to show up then,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's pretty it's not ideal, right? It is one of the worst timings that I think could have been chosen when you just wanna either one, be a kid, be a teen, be whomever, and focus on having fun or being present or just like figuring out who you are and being you. And I think excessive sweating, like many stigmatized conditions, can really take away from your ability to do that, especially
Mhm.
at the onset. So yeah, timing could be better, hyperhidrosis, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, yeah. When I think back to my early teenage years, my earliest memory of hyperhidrosis was when I was around 10 and I was at a friend's birthday, or no, I was at a sleepover. I can't remember if it was a birthday party or not, but we were making up a dance routine, me and some other girls, and I kept noticing that my hands were sweating and they wouldn't stop. And I went to the washroom and I was running them under cold water. I was trying to use a towel to scrub them dry and thinking about it and, using a towel and things like that only made it worse. And my hands ended up getting really inflamed and swollen and red. And that was my very earliest memory of trying to hide my condition and hoping nobody would touch my hands, hoping nobody would notice. And I think, you brought that up when you described your journey, this idea that we hide hyperhidrosis. Do you have any memories that come to mind that were pivotal in your attempt to hide hyperhidrosis?
I have a bank of them, I would say. So early on, I don't know if this is fortunate or not fortunate. I went to a school that had uniforms actually in middle school. And so one of my tricks of hiding it was I wore the only black collared shirt that they offered. I didn't wear a single other color. And then I had two choices of khaki pants or shorts. And so it was beige khaki or it was navy blue, like a dark navy. And so I was wearing navy shorts with a black
Black
collared
shirt.
shirt
Yeah. Yeah.
to try and hide it the best I could. And I think the teachers honestly got tired of me because I kept going to the bathroom throughout the day. And it wasn't because I had to use the restroom. It was because I was truthfully stuffing paper towels in places that paper towels shouldn't necessarily be stuffed.
Mhm.
Um, I was trying to dry myself under the air dryer and anything I could do to just like, can I stop this wetness? You could see it on desks. You could see it on my papers when I was writing. So I think hyperhidrosis, when I think about it, it's hard to think of it in like one vein in
Yeah.
the sense that yes, is invisible to others and can that be embarrassing? Absolutely. But functionally, it's not always that practical and it's not always that easy to live with. And I think when thinking about my earliest memories, and it's funny that my earliest memories, the ones that were probably the hardest were the functional ones. It was the fact that my papers would rip on exams, on notes, and my teachers didn't get that. It was the fact that I was really big into sports and athletics, and thankfully, I ended up gravitating towards soccer, so I didn't have to use my hands, but
Yeah.
being athletic and even playing with the other kids at recess, like, I couldn't catch maybe a football or a basketball, and volleyball was quite difficult. It was these things that I just like actually had such difficulty doing that I think to this day where maybe my confidence has gone up because I've found ways to like manage it in a way that works for me
Mhm.
and that I'm okay accepting.
Mhm.
Uh, the functional pieces when you're having maybe a hard day and you're just like, why can't I open this jar? That can be a breaking moment. This stick that breaks the camel's back, whatever that phrasing is.
Yep.
Um, And so I think I have both memories as an early child where it's the embarrassing piece, which I felt like I was hiding with black clothes or only wearing tank tops and an extra hoodie to hide, but really the functional pieces that just made day to day life harder. So
Totally.
that was probably that.
Yeah. There's so much labor and thought put into coping with day-to-day moments, right? When you have hyperhidrosis, it's a burden that we carry, and there's always like a little bit of extra work, whether or not your motivations are because you're embarrassed and you're trying to hide it, or for me, I feel like as I've gotten older, that's become less of a motivation, but I just want to feel comfortable. I want to feel physically comfortable. I don't want my hands to be swollen and my skin to be aggravated, and I just want to feel comfortable and not wet.
I think like a while ago. So, like you said, we've connected for months. And when I was deciding on a new name for the company, I told you Twofold. And most people's reaction is like, what does Twofold have to do with sweat or hyperhidrosis? I don't see the connection. And it's a very valid point. But the name itself goes back to what you just said. It's the fact that it's more than just the physical, it's that entirely separate piece, that mental burden, everything that you plan your day around, the psychological impacts. It's everything else beyond just the physical sweat that you
Yeah,
carry as a person with hyperhidrosis. So when I like to think about it, it's the condition itself. It's really twofold. It's more than just what you see at the surface.
totally.
Um,
Totally. I love that name. I think it's great. It is more than just sweat. So, one thing that you mentioned that I want to circle back on was that you ended up playing soccer, right? And so, but I wonder how much of our decisions in life have been subconsciously influenced by our sweat. I remember when I was in university doing a course and we had talked about body comportment, and it was looking at gender and how women and men learn to hold their bodies differently and use their bodies differently, and that develops muscles in different ways and abilities and things like that. And I often relate that back to hyperhidrosis because I think that as somebody who has underarm sweating, I'm not as free with my arms. I don't often lift my arms above my hands. And you mentioned earlier too about being maybe more physically reserved, like you don't want to necessarily touch people as much, or you don't feel maybe as comfortable with that. Does that resonate or ring a bell for you?
Absolutely. I don't know. I'd probably say maybe soccer. Maybe it was like a gift because I could touch an opposing player and they'd cringe and that could help me. Um, but in terms of going in for a handshake and being seen as confident or not, and to your point about underarms, like I would constantly be fidgeting with my clothes and like pulling them looser so that the sweat droplets would, run down instead of be absorbed by my clothing. Um, those are seen as less confident traits in how you show up.
Mm.
And I think you're aware of this. Many with hyperhidrosis are perceived as nervous,
Mm.
even if we're not. And even if
Mhm.
it's not the case, with many it can be because it's like, hey, now I know I'm going to sweat. You kick in the nerves, and then it's like you sweat more, and it's this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
But I'm typically not going into a meeting or meeting a new person being nervous about it, but they're going to think I am. Or even with the whole touching aspect, I remember even in high school, I did not want to hold hands with my first boyfriend. That was quite embarrassing for me because I didn't know how they would react. So a lot around how I was seen personality wise in terms of am I affectionate or am I cold? Am
Right.
I confident or am I nervous? I
Yeah.
definitely do believe hyperhidrosis and excessive sweating did push me one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking about the hand-holding thing. It's like you're protecting yourself, right? But the projection that you're giving off to that other person is, they're wondering, does this person not like me? They're trying to read into it too. So it creates this whole situation where it's just you trying to protect yourself, and then you're now being perceived in the world in a certain light. And you say, like, maybe not as confident or more anxious. Maria from My Life as a Puddle says, I'm not sweating because I'm nervous. I'm nervous because I'm sweating. So it's sort of flipping the script and looking at how sweat can both make us nervous. And then because we're sweating, we're also feeling anxious about how the world perceives us.
Exactly. Actually, one of the things I think I am most grateful from having excessive sweating is I think you walk into the world maybe like less judgmental and less assuming of others. And it's really just because like you want that same mindset given to you. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
once you have one or two experiences,
Mm-hmm.
um, you're like, maybe this is actually how everyone sees me when in reality I found that not to be the case. And I feel like maybe you have too, as
Yeah.
you've like kind of grown into it. Now I meet people and if they want to go for a handshake, I'm just like, hey, like it might be wet, but here we are. And like nobody necessarily cares that
Mm-hmm.
much. And so for me, it does now come down to the functional, the physical comfort piece. But I think the owning it and getting past kind of a lot of those mental and psychological burdens of how you're perceived is one of the hardest things when
Yeah.
living with that.
Absolutely. I can really relate to that. So, I want to talk a little bit about Twofold now, your company. For those people listening who don't know what Twofold is, can you explain what your company is, what you do, and why you started?
Definitely. I'll start with the origin story. Going back to my life with hyperhidrosis, I did hit a pretty big point where I had tried many treatments. I actually have nerve damage from some of the treatments I've tried to the point where I don't have feeling in certain areas. And
Yeah.
that definitely had me lose hope because I thought I had tried every treatment under the sun. And for reference, I was pre med and I got my master's in public health and did biology, chemistry. And I thought if something was out there, I would know about it. Like I felt like I should. I felt confident enough that I had searched the ends of the earth for anything that could help. And it wasn't until I was actually just talking with a dermatologist friend of mine and they had recommended glycopyrrolate. And he was like, do you know, have you tried the pill? And I was like, what do you mean there's a sweat pill? How did I not know about this? At the time, the doctors that I had gone to, they were fairly unfamiliar. And so it was just constantly just try antiperspirants
Mhm.
or try needles, try microwave thermolysis, try all of these other things. And when I actually took the glycopyrrolate for the first time, as cheesy as it sounds, Karina, my worldview got brighter. Like I could not believe that my hands felt like what I thought someone who sweat normally felt like. And
Yeah.
it worked within hours for me. And so I was like, I was hooked because I had been living for decades with this for so long. And I was like, oh my goodness, what would life have been like without this? Like everyone should know about this. Why don't more people know about this?
Mhm.
And that's when I turned to all like so many communities through Facebook, through Reddit, through online forums. And I just started chatting with people to see, like, did they have a similar experience, and that like they didn't know about a lot of treatments, and or why weren't they able to access them? And after hundreds and hundreds of calls, and something I was very surprised about is how willing they were just to share their story with me and
To
share
talk.
what they had tried with a
Yeah.
complete stranger, you
Yeah.
know?
And this was when
Uh,
you were doing research for your company.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's where I
Yeah.
was like, just could this be a company? Like, is there something here? Because like maybe they're not, maybe there isn't. And it's just that it was a massive oversight on my part. Right. And so talking with every person, it was the same two things that I mentioned before. It was just like access to specialists is really hard, and
Mhm.
access to products is even harder.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, it takes months to get in the US to get access to a dermatologist appointment. And then out of that, you're also paying copays. And what are you paying for? Maybe one treatment that just might not work. And then so it's like, okay, I spend time and this treatment doesn't work. Now need to schedule another appointment. And so you're putting yourself months and months out. And that's even if you start with a doctor who knows how to treat hyperhidrosis.
Yeah.
After looking at I pulled insurance claims data, and what that showed was that it actually takes 4 separate doctor visits to even get a diagnosis and first treatment for excessive sweating.
Wow. Yeah, I
And
believe it.
exactly, and it's because you're going to one physician who may not know how to treat it, and so they refer you to potentially an endocrinologist, and then maybe a neurologist, and then finally to a dermatologist. It's all of this jumping around that, one, it takes time, two, it takes money, but it's also mentally very exhausting because it's so many points. It's just there's so much friction. It's difficult, and you do feel like giving up. And then once you
Mhm.
finally get to the place where you can have a diagnosis or you can at least start treatment, most people, the first treatment doesn't necessarily work. And so then you're on this path of trying multiple treatments. And so just imagine this entire pathway that you've just gone through, and how difficult that is, and how much, in a sense, if you want to think of it as a rejection because something's not working and you're not getting to the outcome that you really need, just the time, the energy, the mental, again, burden that this is taking.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's a
sharing your
lot.
story you're sharing your story each time, right? And not everybody understands the extent to which hyperhidrosis affects one's life. And sometimes I've personally felt like I've had to convince doctors or people that this is a real thing, this is not just sweat.
I couldn't agree with that more. It's friends, families, doctors. I like to call it the ultimate gaslighting. If you have hyperhidrosis, because people will tell you it's just sweat. Oh, you'll grow out of it. Oh, just put on some deodorant. And it's like, you are not listening to me.
Yeah,
And so that's where it's really finding specialists who know about excessive sweating and they know it's a thing. I think that's step one. And so being able to have physicians who listen and can recognize, like, hey, you are dealing with something real. I am here for you. I am trained on this. And
mhm,
making that access, shortening it from months or years to same day, like that's been really impactful. And give one example is that I had this one woman, and she had previously flown from, I believe, it's Georgia, and she had flown all the way to California to just get a glycopyrrolate prescription. It's
wow.
and it worked for her, and
Yeah,
she was so happy. But the depths that were required for somebody to get that prescription, or even that were she perceived to get care, that
yeah, that's
is
wild.
unnecessary.
Yeah, that it truly is. And so you mentioned before that people have heard of glycopyrrolate. I think that if you go on the Reddit groups, certainly lots of talk about glycopyrrolate there. But the general group of people living with hyperhidrosis, I still don't think knows that much about glycopyrrolate. And that story demonstrates that maybe there's not a lot of doctors that know about glycopyrrolate. I know when I went to my doctor, I went armed with knowledge and I educated her on, this is a drug that's used off label, and she did her own research and then prescribed it to me, but she didn't know a lot about it. Now she was willing and open to learn, which was awesome. And we have talked about it a lot since, and she said that she's now prescribing it to other patients that have hyperhidrosis, so that was exciting for me to hear. But it's still really not known amongst family doctors and maybe other doctors as well.
Couldn't agree more. And that was one of the things that, again, prior to even launching, we did investigate quite heavily. Um, because even beyond just being willing to prescribe something, a lot of people who have successfully been taking glycopyrrolate, oxybutynin, or another anticholinergic medication or medications in general, really, um, they know that like that initial dose may not be what works for them. And so this was something I actually didn't know about when I first took glycopyrrolate. And I actually did experience some side effects.
Yeah.
I experienced brain fog and dry mouth, and the dry mouth I was fine to live with. But the brain fog, I wasn't a fan of. And each day I couldn't have that. However, at the time, I didn't know about titrating a dose and how you can actually, work your way up on dosing to find a better level that works for you to reduce your sweat while also optimizing and letting your body adjust to the potential side effects because your body
Interesting.
can. And so that was something I didn't know until I started working with a dermatologist. And when I had actually connected with the International Hyperhidrosis Society, one thing that we did talk about was that many people don't know about titrating.
Mm.
And having a physician who's guiding your care that can help you find that right dosing, I believe is really paramount to people who maybe don't have the best first initial experience with maybe an oral medication or any medication in general. And so one, giving access to physicians for, like, diagnosing, that's phenomenal, like, like I said, that's step 1, but then step 2 is, like, hyperhidrosis isn't standard across the board, there's not one product that fixes it for every single person. It's very unique, and people have different severities, they have different places that they sweat, they have different reactions to certain medications. And so having somebody that can actually guide your care along the way, with different treatments, with different products, and finding what works for you, doing that under medical guidance as opposed to necessarily a lot that's found on Reddit forums of a lot of DIYing and Facebook
Yeah.
groups. um, I think that's very paramount to safe, more effective, and overall happiness when they are trying new products or trying to find something that works for them and what they're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's such a great point. I see often people dismissing glycopyrrolate because they have had that bad first experience or it didn't work, maybe they didn't take enough. And of course, glycopyrrolate isn't for everybody and it does affect people differently. But I think people give up quickly. I know that for myself, I tried titrating it and tried to find a dose that worked well for me, but I was still getting some side effects even on that sort of right dose. So I didn't know that your body can adjust to those side effects over time. So that's something interesting to explore as well. Okay, so getting back to your story then with Twofold. So you did a bunch of research, talked to folks about their hyperhidrosis story, and then what happened?
Yeah, so kind of to the point about the side effects is like we were really trying to focus in on what is the biggest problem or what is one of the biggest problems that we can start with. And one of them came down to side effects. And because medications won't work well for everyone, or many people have tried multiple treatments again, and they know that they are not looking for a side effect, or they know they're looking for convenience or just something easier. And so, what we ended up doing, 'cause you can do this, which is pretty neat, is you can take an oral medication and actually compound it into a topical version. And you see this across hair loss, you see this in acne, and one of the reasons is if you take an oral medication, which, a lot of people don't necessarily want because they don't want full body systemic absorption and side effects. And maybe they only want something for their hands or they just want something for their underarms, like a very specific area, and they don't want the rest of their body necessarily affected. You can use a topical version. And so that you are focused on just the area that you apply it to. You have that lower systemic absorption, lower potential for side effects. And so we actually started with oxybutynin. I like to call it like a sister to glycopyrrolate. We started with an oxybutynin gel. And one of the big things that we were finding with people is, your skin is different in different areas, like thickness wise, how things absorb. And so we've designed this gel base around the oxybutynin so that, skin in your hands or skin in your feet that's thicker, the whole formulation is around enhanced transdermal properties. So the oxybutynin will actually get carried to where it needs to be, which can be an issue with some other treatments or medications where it just sits on the skin, which isn't where it's acting. That's not how an anticholinergic works. So yeah, we formulated, worked with some incredible dermatologists and pharmacists to make this formulation, did a ton of testing and iterations and feedback, and it was a blast. And then that's what we started to launch with. And we have people who really are searching for minimized side effects and something that they can do at night. It's been interesting to get feedback on the whys behind why people are reaching out and finding us, but that's ultimately why we started with this product. And we know oxybutynin, again, it's not for everyone, not one product is. And so this is what we started and launched with. And yeah, we have a few more things that we're looking to launch this year, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So if this potentially isn't what you're looking for, then we can still help along that pathway and finding what is and what does work. So that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Anytime we can introduce more options to that toolkit for people with hyperhidrosis, I think that's such a win for everybody. So, from broad strokes, recognizing that you're not a doctor, what is the difference between glycopyrrolate and oxybutynin?
Yeah, so they're both, which is pretty interesting, part of that similar class of medication of anticholinergic. And so they just have different use cases. They're both used off label in the oral forms for hyperhidrosis, yet they've been around for decades. Right. So they work more at that neural signaling level, intercepting the signaling of acetylcholine. But why some people respond to one over the other is something that frustrates me day in and day out because hyperhidrosis, as we all know, is an under researched area. And we just don't know
Mhm.
why one of these works for some people and not for the other, even though they have that similar mechanism in terms of what they're targeting and how they do work. And so there's a little bit more that's just unknown at this point. So hopefully it'll get more attention and what it deserves. But unfortunately, we just have no insights yet.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that needs to be discovered still and explored and tested around hyperhidrosis in general.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So, in terms of Twofold, then you have a topical oxybutynin gel. Walk me through what your access is like. I know that you're only available for folks in the US, but what does it look like in terms of getting a prescription? How can folks access your gel?
Definitely. So it is a prescription medication. So what you do is you go onto our site, and if you're interested, you begin an intake. And so it's really nice because it is all 100% online. You don't have to wait for appointments. And ultimately, what we do is you have your medical intake that's collected, and that's your medical history, it's other conditions, it's if you have allergies, your sweat symptoms, how long, really just gathering all the necessary information that a doctor does need to be able to evaluate a person and whether or not this treatment is suitable for them. And so we start there. And then at the end, you have space to ask the dermatologist whatever questions you have. And once you submit it, dermatologist reviews it. You are set up with a patient portal dashboard. Basically, you have full messaging access to the doctor and to the clinical support team so that they can go back and forth, answer your questions, have that dialogue before the script is even written. Um, and so you're able to be like, hey, I'm actually currently using this treatment, but I'm looking for this. Could this be a good fit? Or like, this is a symptom I'm experiencing, or will this be itchy? Like they will really ask a lot about the treatment or maybe contraindications that could be possible. And so it's neat because you're able to have that back and forth almost instantaneously within 24 hours. And if everything just looks great, you can get the prescription in 24 hours. It's really quick. So you have that instant access to talking with the doctor, you have the instant access to the treatment. And then from there, it does get sent, the script, to our partner pharmacy, who will then fulfill it and then ship it to you. They typically ship either same or next business day. So we try to be really quick about
Wow.
it.
Yeah.
I think people have really just been waiting so long for treatments, like
Yeah.
years. Like, and so we can get something to you faster that, has been evaluated by the dermatologist. They know your background, they know everything, then we can do that in a shorter time frame. I think that's truthfully, I like to say, I think that's just what the people deserve. So,
Yeah. No, that's
uh,
amazing because often when you decide you want to try something new or you want to reach out for support, it's because something has happened and you need to have a change. You need something different. So the fact that you can get access so quickly and get your hands on a product that could help you is really incredible.
thank you. Yeah, we're
Mm.
pretty proud about the turnaround time and just the access to the doctors as well. It's really neat. Definitely one of the things we're most proud of. But
Mhm.
that's really the process. One thing I do like to note is hyperhidrosis, you have a primary and you have secondary, right? And so secondary is it can be caused by another medical condition, a medication, and things like that. And so in the intake, we are very purposeful about screening for some of these other conditions. And this is a conversation I've had with multiple people in this space is you don't want to mask the symptoms of something larger, and so we're very aware about making sure that we have that full understanding of the
Yeah.
background of the history, what people are going through and dealing with. So, is this treatment a good fit for you? Or maybe it's not. And either way, you're able to get that feedback from the dermatologist free of charge instantly. So that's what we like is we're able to offer that layer of reassurance risk free.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
And you're not going to get gaslit, which is always a great thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as somebody who has hyperhidrosis, building a product for other people with hyperhidrosis, what has that journey been like for you? What is this has this taught you anything about your own hyperhidrosis? Has this been complicated by your own hyperhidrosis? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think on multiple fronts. Like one, it's fun and it's motivating. And do many people wake up with sweat being the first thing on their mind each morning? I don't know, but like, hey, I do. And I
Yeah.
think that's great. I celebrate that, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things is I know a lot of companies, they don't necessarily start out with a lot on social media because it's not like a quick return or anything like that. But
For
one
sure.
of the things, right? And so
Yeah.
one of the things is that we actually started that route, and reason being is hyperhidrosis, many people don't even know the term. We
Yeah.
like over 50% are under or undiagnosed, and so we do a lot of just awareness and showing people, like, what living, like, a day in the life, what certain tasks look like, or what dealing with other people look like, and what are these hidden nuances of living with excessive sweating. And the amount of messages and calls that I get from people who are like, "I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s, I didn't know this was a condition, I didn't know there was treatment for it, but I can't open the cap off the marker either." And they are just they are just grateful
Yeah.
because they're like, "There is something out there." And so really focusing on that awareness piece is something that was a very intentional decision that I think myself having hyperhidrosis and knowing how recognition of what living with it means and the fact that, like, oh, this is a condition or this is treatable. That was a decision I made because of my experiences and because of the experiences that I've talked with others where, we like to carry water bottles around with us almost constantly so we can blame a clammy handshake on the water bottle.
Yeah.
And so you're being able to showcase all of these nuances and all these nuanced scenarios that we live with, but we don't talk about because
Yeah.
it's so stigmatized. So if you can show people that they're not the only ones carrying that water bottle, you start to feel less alone. You start to realize, oh, there is something. And if I wanted to treat it, there are options that I can look at. So we've really found a lot of that to resonate with people. And so we really started there. And that was very intentional in terms of the why.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back to the functional piece. And I will share something with my hyperhidrosis because although I use Twofold, I use the treatment daily on my hands, my feet, my underarms. It works for me great. But I will stop using it sometimes so that I can be reminded of these certain scenarios. I can give you an example of a few weeks ago where I wasn't using the treatment and I was trying to figure out our packaging for the oral medications because we're going to launch those soon. I was having a hard day at that point. It was a Friday,
Mhm.
and I think multiple things had gone wrong or weren't going how I thought they would go. And I had gotten all of my samples in of these oral medication bottles, these pill bottles. I couldn't open a single one. It was so hard to get the cap off.
Yeah.
And
Kept
I
slipping.
it kept slipping, but I was
Yeah.
truthfully like at my breaking point that day because it had been so hard before. And the fact that I couldn't get the cap off of this medication bottle that I'm trying to launch our oral medications because people are dealing with excessive sweating, and I'm trying to decide packaging, but I can't even open the bottle for the excessive
Yeah.
sweating
Yeah.
medication. Like, the irony there,
Yeah.
but it really broke me because it was such a seemingly simple thing that anyone else can do.
Mhm.
And in that moment, I had the hard day, and then I just couldn't do something as simple as opening a medication bottle. I had to take a few breaths, and I was like, "Wait, Ashley, this is why you're doing this."
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, because this decision for packaging is one that, maybe someone else who hasn't lived with hyperhidrosis or excessive sweating, like, they might not know to do that, to, like, actually focus on the functional piece.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that day, that night, I was able to then go and find and scour for more sample options and ultimately ended up finding some that I can open with the sweatiest of hands.
Mm.
And to me, that was huge.
Yeah, I mean, you have the
Yeah, like
empathy, right? You can use your empathy to help design your products. I think back to the earlier story we were talking about how our doctors both told us to wrap our hands in saran wrap. It's like, okay, well, the person making that recommendation definitely doesn't have hyperhidrosis because for anybody who has hyperhidrosis on their hands, they know that that will just trigger pools of sweat. I think when people have a condition and they're using that empathy and that knowledge and that insight to design products, it's just so powerful.
I really appreciate you saying that, and I couldn't agree more. One of the reasons, so I actually have it with me, is but I always have it on me. The gel itself it's a gel.
Mhm.
It's not a lotion. And that was an intentional choice
Mm.
because
Yeah, lotion is
what do we know
triggering.
about lotion?
Yeah, even the thought of it,
Exactly.
right?
But is a lotion maybe prettier? Sure, maybe. But we designed this so that it would be fast drying. And that was something that took multiple iterations in the formulation so that it would dry faster, so that it wouldn't trigger people sweating when they put it on.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's a lot of those little, again, nuances, I love that word, that living with hyperhidrosis make you more attuned to, that other
Mhm.
people don't necessarily have to think about. And it's definitely come through in terms of the product itself. One of the things that we're really intent on is co-creating and building with the community because I know that my sweat story, my sweat experience is not representative of everyone else's. And so we have individuals who are maybe running out of product faster than anticipated. And when they messaged me that, my heart sank because this was supposed to last a little bit longer. And if they found something that finally worked for them, and then it was like, oh my gosh, it's gone.
Yeah.
I can, like, I did not like that feeling. And so I was like, hi, can we hop on a call very quickly and figure this out? And
Mhm.
so we've gotten feedback, and so we're actually revamping our packaging so that,
Mhm.
people can see through and see how much is left.
Mhm.
And so there's
What a good
that. There's the
idea. Yeah,
it is, but it didn't start like that, right?
sure.
And so there's that. There's the fact that face and scalp are one of the hardest areas to treat. And so we're working with individuals on face and scalp products. And so we're
Amazing.
really trying, yeah,
Yeah.
we're really trying to tap into what do people want? What do they need? And hey, I don't know what the best experience is gonna be, but if we can do that together, we can figure it out. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a thing is trying to be asking constantly, what feedback can you give me, good, bad, or ugly, that we can make this better for you? I
That's
think to your
awesome.
point, like the empathy, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
I love that. I love that. I love what you're doing. I've been following along with your social media content. It's so great.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have TikTok and Instagram is what we're most active on both of those, and we just are pushing a lot of content, and I'm very proud of what the team and our people have done on that front.
Yeah, for sure. You should be. And I know there are a lot of women in the Sweaty Girl Society community who struggle with craniofacial and will be extremely happy if there's another option for them, because that is a really tricky one. So that's really hopeful. I feel like we could continue talking forever. So I'll have to have you back again and we can dive into some of these other areas. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, they can find us on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. Our handles are its_twofold because, it's twofold. Otherwise, if you end up going to our site, we have our email, hello@its_twofold. We try to make ourselves available through text, through call, email, and then your dashboard. So there's that. If you go to our site, you can book a direct Calendly link and we can have a phone call if there's questions you have.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley. I wish you all the luck. I think what you're doing is awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I could talk about sweat forever. So thanks for engaging.
Thanks for listening to the Sweaty Girl Society podcast. If you liked today's episode, join our free membership community at sweatygirlsociety.com/community.